the streets into dark mirrors, and Emma Rodriguez had never wanted to be invisible more desperately. Her high heels made a thunderous noise against the wet asphalt as she ran down Fifth Avenue, her navy blue dress clinging to her body like a soaked second skin. "Shoot, shoot, shoot," she muttered, throwing her brown hair back and looking over her shoulder. There he was, Jake Harrington, her ex-boyfriend, emerging from 11 Madison Park Restaurant with that determined look she knew all too well. The same look he got when he decided he knew what was best for her, even when she completely disagreed. Emma had made the fatal mistake of accepting his dinner invitation, thinking they could have a civilized conversation about some belongings that were still in his apartment. How naive. Jake had other plans that involved an endless speech about how they were perfect for each other and how she was making the biggest mistake of her life. "Emma, come back here. You're being dramatic." His voice echoed through the street, cutting through the traffic noise. Dramatic. My foot, she thought, picking up her pace. Jake could never accept that no was simply not a valid answer. To him, all of Emma's decisions were just phases she would eventually get over. Her feet were already aching, but adrenaline kept her moving. She turned at the first corner, desperately searching for a taxi, a subway, anything that would get her out of there. That's when she saw the car. A black Mercedes-Benz, elegant as a panther, was parked in front of the Carril Hotel. The engine was running, the windows were open, and most importantly, it appeared to be empty. Well, at least it seemed to be. Emma didn't think twice. She opened the back door and threw herself onto the leather seat, pulling the door shut behind her with enough force to make the car rock. Phew, she sighed, sinking into the luxurious seat. The interior smelled of expensive leather and something masculine, sandalwood, maybe. She closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to relax. Interesting escape technique. Emma's eyes flew open, and she nearly had a heart attack. In the driver's seat, a man was watching her through the rearview mirror. Perfectly styled black hair, blue eyes that seemed capable of seeing through souls, and an expression that oscillated between amused and slightly irritated. I, Emma stammered, trying to straighten up in the seat. "Sorry, I thought that the car was empty." He turned to face her directly, and Emma felt the air escape from her lungs. The man was devastatingly handsome, the type who appeared on Forbes covers and made grown women act like teenagers. "Yes, exactly that," she said, trying to maintain some dignity, while her hair dripped water onto the leather seat. "Look, I know this seems crazy, but my ex-boyfriend is chasing me, and I just needed a place to hide for a few minutes." He arched an eyebrow. "And you chose my car? I didn't know it was your car, clearly." He studied her face for a moment, and Emma felt like she was being evaluated. "You're wet, very observant, and you're dripping on my Italian leather seat. I can pay for the cleaning." "I'm sure you can." There was something in his voice, an amused tone that didn't match his serious expression. "The question is, what do I do with a soaked woman who invaded my car?" Before Emma could answer, she saw Jake passing by the window, looking around like someone searching for something lost. Instinctively, she ducked down in the seat. "Oh gosh, he's there," she whispered. The man followed her gaze. "The persistent ex-boyfriend?" "Yes." "Please don't let him see me." For a edit, he said nothing. Then, suddenly, he pressed a button, and the windows began to rise, darkening the car's interior. "Problem solved," he said, his voice now softer. Emma slowly straightened up, her heart still racing. "Thank you, seriously. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet." He turned completely toward her, and Emma noticed he was wearing a suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. "Let's establish some ground rules. First, who are you?" "Emma Rodriguez." "Second, why is your ex-boyfriend chasing you?" "Because he can't accept that I broke up with him. He thinks he knows what's best for me better than I do." "Third, do you have any connection to the Bianchi family?" Emma frowned. "Who?" "The Bianchis. Italian family. Questionable business." "No. Why?" He studied her for a few more seconds, then nodded. "Well, that's a relief." "Why?" "Because, my dear Emma Rodriguez, you just hid in Luca DeSantis's car." The name hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. Luca DeSantis, the richest and most mysterious man in New York, the king of real estate, who, according to rumors, had connections with people you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. "Oh shoot," she murmured. "Exactly," he said, a smile forming at the corner of his mouth. And now we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves you being in my car at the exact moment I was going to a very important meeting. The kind that could put us in complicated situations. Emma swallowed hard. Complicated. How? Well, Luca started the car, and the engine purred like a satisfied animal. That depends on how good an actress you are. Actress? Congratulations, Emma Rodriguez. You just became my girlfriend. And with that, he accelerated, leaving Jake Harrington and Emma's previous life behind on the wet streets of Manhattan. The DeSantis Tower stretched into the gray New York sky like a glass and steel monument to ambition. Emma pressed her face against the window of the Mercedes as they pulled into the underground garage, watching the floors disappear above them. You know, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, when I woke up this morning, become fake girlfriend to mysterious billionaire wasn't on my to-do list. Luca glanced at her in the rearview mirror. And yet, here we are, she repeated, suddenly very aware of how ridiculous she must look. Her dress was still damp, her makeup probably resembled a raccoon's, and her hair looked like she'd been through a wind tunnel. Can I ask why you need a fake girlfriend? Business. He pulled into a parking spot marked with his name in gold lettering. Sometimes appearances matter more than reality. That's cryptic. I'm a cryptic person. Emma Pattern snorted. Great. I'm fake dating Batman. For the first time since she'd thrown herself into his car, Luca actually smiled. Not just the amused quirk of his lips, but a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Did you just compare me to Batman? Well, you're rich, mysterious, and apparently have a secret identity. If the cape fits, no cape, but I do have a helicopter. Of course you do. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Emma realized that, despite the insanity of the situation, she wasn't entirely uncomfortable. There was something about Luca DeSantis that made her feel safe, which was ridiculous considering his reputation. So, she said finally, what exactly does being your fake girlfriend entail tonight? You'll accompany me to a charity gala. The Bianchi family will be there. The same Bianchi family you asked me about. The same. His expression darkened. They've been trying to muscle in on my territory for months. Having you there will send a message. What kind of message? That I'm settled, domestic, not a threat to their family business. Emma stared at him. You want them to think you've gone soft because you have a girlfriend? Essentially. Yes. And you think I can pull that off? Luca turned to study her properly for the first time. Even disheveled and damp, Emma Rodriguez was stunning. Not the artificial beauty of the socialites he usually dated, but something warmer, more real. Her dark eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor, and there was a strength in her jaw that suggested she didn't back down from a fight. I think, he said slowly, that you're exactly what I need. Okay, but what happens after tonight? We'll figure that out as we go. Emma laughed, a sound that was half hysteria, half genuine amusement. You're asking me to improvise my way through a relationship with one of the most powerful men in New York. I'm asking you to help me avoid a war. The seriousness in his voice stopped her laughter cold. A war? The Bianchis don't negotiate, Emma. They take. And if they think I'm weak, they'll come for everything I've built. She looked at him and saw something she hadn't expected. Vulnerability, just a flash of it, quickly hidden behind his usual mask of control. But it was there. Why me? She asked quietly. You could have any woman in New York. Why trust a stranger who broke into your car? Because, he said, opening his door, sometimes the best solutions are the ones you don't see coming. They took a private elevator to the 57th floor, where Luca's penthouse occupied the entire top of the building. Emma tried not to gawk as they walked through rooms that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, and every piece of furniture looked like it cost more than her annual rent. Clara will take care of you, Luca said, gesturing to a middle-aged woman who appeared as if summoned. She had kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She'll find you something to wear for tonight. Mr. DeSantis, Clara said in lightly accented English, her voice warm but efficient. Your brother called. He's coming up. Which brother? The one who thinks he's funny. Luca sighed. Nico. Before he could say anything else, the elevator chimed, and a man who looked like a younger, more relaxed version of Luca strolled in. He was handsome in the same devastating way. But where Luca was controlled intensity, this man was pure charm. "Luca," he called out, then stopped short when he saw Emma. His face lit up with curiosity and delight. Well, what do we have here?" "Nico. This is Emma." "Emma, my brother Nico." Nico's grin widened as he approached them. "The famous Emma. I was wondering when I'd get to meet the woman who's got my brother all twisted up." Emma shot a panicked look at Luca, who looked remarkably calm for someone whose cover story was about to be blown. "Twisted up?" she repeated carefully. "He's been different lately," Nico continued, oblivious to the tension, distracted, happy even, which for Luca is basically a personality transplant. "He actually smiled during a board meeting last week. People thought he was having a stroke. I'm standing right here," Luca said dryly. "Sorry, Fratello." Nico turned his attention back to Emma, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "So, how long have you two been keeping this secret? And more importantly, how did you manage to crack through his fortress of solitude?" Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. How was she supposed to answer that? 2 months, Luca said smoothly. "We wanted to keep it private." 2 months? Nico looked genuinely hurt, placing a dramatic hand over his heart. "And you didn't tell me?" "I'm wounded, Luca. Truly wounded. Here I was thinking you were just becoming more antisocial than usual. You'll survive. I might not." This is the kind of betrayal that scars a man for life. Nico clutched his chest dramatically, then winked at Emma. "I like her already. She's got you using full sentences instead of grunts." "Don't you have somewhere to be?" Luca asked, but there was affection in his tone. "Actually, yes. I'm meeting Sophia for lunch, but I wanted to stop by." Nico trailed off, his expression becoming more serious. The Bianchis made another move. They bought the Horizon building. Luca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "When?" "This morning. Cash deal. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore." Emma felt like she was watching a conversation in a foreign language. The tension between the brothers was palpable, and she realized that whatever was happening with the Bianchis was more serious than Luca had let on. "We'll discuss this later," Luca said, glancing meaningfully at Emma. "Of course." Nico's easy smile returned, but Emma could see the concern lingering in his eyes. "It was lovely meeting you, Emma. I hope we'll see much more of each other. Maybe you can teach this one how to relax." "I'll do my best," Emma managed, surprised by how natural the words felt. After Nico left, Emma turned to Luca. "The Horizon building? It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated." "Yes, it is." He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing his words. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Emma thought about Jake, about the suffocating feeling of being told what to think and feel. She thought about the way Luca's smile had transformed his entire face, and the vulnerability she'd glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior. She thought about the fear she'd seen in his eyes when he mentioned the Bianchis, and the way he'd protected her from her ex without even knowing her name. "Ask me again in the morning," she said. "Fair enough." He started toward what she assumed was his office, then paused. "Emma? Yeah? Thank you for this. For everything." "Don't thank me yet," she said, watching Clara approach with what looked like several garment bags and a knowing smile. "I haven't even gotten dressed up yet." "Still, that's what I'm afraid of," Luca murmured, but he was smiling as he said it. As Clara led her toward what appeared to be a guest suite, Emma caught her reflection in one of the massive windows. She looked like a drowned rat, but for the first time in months, she felt truly alive. Whatever she was getting herself into, it was definitely going to be interesting. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom glittered like something out of a fairy tale, all crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Emma stood at the entrance, her hand tucked into the crook of Luca's arm, and tried not to hyperventilate. The dress Clara had chosen was perfection, a deep emerald silk that hugged her curves without being too revealing, with a neckline that was elegant rather than provocative. Her hair had been styled into a sophisticated updo, and the makeup artist had somehow made her look like a movie star while still looking like herself. "You look stunning," Luca murmured in her ear, and she felt a little thrill that was definitely not part of the act. "I feel like I'm about to throw up," she whispered back. "That's normal. I felt the same way at my first board meeting. This is not helping." "Sorry." His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, warm and reassuring. "Just remember, you're not Emma Rodriguez, struggling event planner. You're Emma Rodriguez, the woman who captured Luca DeSantis's heart. Did I capture your heart?" Apparently, they moved into the crowd, and Emma was amazed by how naturally Luca navigated the room. He knew everyone, and everyone knew him, but she noticed how people's eyes followed him, some with respect, others with wariness, and a few with what looked like carefully concealed fear. "Mr. DeSantis." A woman in a silver gown approached them, her smile bright enough to power the chandeliers. She was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that came with personal trainers and regular spa visits. "How wonderful to see you, Evelyn." Luca nodded politely. "You look lovely, and you must be the mysterious girlfriend we've all been hearing whispers about." Evelyn's eyes ran over Emma with the kind of assessment that wealthy women had perfected into an art form. "Emma Rodriguez," Emma said, extending her hand with what she hoped was confidence. "And you are?" "Evelyn Whitmore. I chair the hospital board with Luca." Her handshake was firm, calculating. "Tell me, dear, what do you do?" Emma felt Luca tense almost imperceptibly beside her. They hadn't discussed her cover story beyond the basic relationship details. "I'm an event planner," she said, deciding to stick close to the truth. "I specialize in corporate events and fundraisers." "How practical." Evelyn's tone suggested that practical was slightly less appealing than a contagious disease. "I find that practical skills are often the most valuable," Emma replied smoothly. "After all, someone has to make sure events like this actually happen. The logistics alone for something of this scale must be incredibly complex." Evelyn's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, I suppose that's true. The attention to detail here is remarkable," Emma continued, genuinely impressed as she looked around. The lighting, the flow of the room, even the positioning of the bars to prevent bottlenecks. Whoever coordinated this really knows their craft. "Well, we hired professionals, of course," Evelyn stammered, clearly not expecting to be outmaneuvered by someone she'd dismissed as practical. "Smart choice," Emma said warmly. "There's nothing worse than a poorly planned event. Trust me, I've seen fundraisers fail spectacularly because someone thought they could wing it." "If you'll excuse us," Luca interjected, though Emma could hear the amusement in his voice. "I see someone I need to speak with." As they moved away, Emma felt a surge of pride. "I think I handled that pretty well." "You did more than handle it. You dismantled her." There was definite admiration in Luca's voice. "Evelyn Whitmore has made grown men cry with that condescending tone of hers. Years of dealing with bridezillas teaches you how to handle passive aggression." Emma grinned. "Plus, she was being mean for no reason. I don't like bullies." "Neither do I." Luca's expression grew more serious as his gaze swept the room. Speaking of which, Emma followed his line of sight and saw a group of men in expensive suits gathered near the far wall. They looked like they belonged at the gala, but there was something about them that set them apart, an aura of controlled danger that made other guests unconsciously give them space. "The Bianchis?" she asked quietly. "Giovanni and his sons, Antonio and Matteo." Luca's voice was carefully neutral. "They haven't noticed us yet. Should we go introduce ourselves?" "Eventually, but first, we need to sell our story to a few more people. Social proof." For the next hour, Luca guided her through the crowd like a master conductor. They spoke with board members, charity organizers, and business associates. Emma found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations, especially when people talked about the hospital's work or the causes the fundraiser supported. "You're really good at this," Luca observed as they took a moment by themselves near a window overlooking Central Park. "At what?" "Being yourself. Most people at these things put on a persona, play a role. You're just genuine. Is that bad for our cover?" "No," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "It's perfect. It's exactly what I need." Before Emma could ask what he meant by that, a new voice interrupted them. "Luca DeSantis, as I live and breathe." They turned to see a tall, silver-haired man approaching. He was handsome in a distinguished way, but there was something calculating in his eyes that made Emma's skin crawl. "Giovanni," Luca said, his entire demeanor shifting. The warmth disappeared, replaced by polite professionalism. "I wasn't sure you'd make it tonight. Wouldn't miss it. The hospital does such important work." Giovanni's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "And who is this lovely young lady?" "Emma Rodriguez," Luca said, his arm tightening almost protectively around her waist. "Emma, this is Giovanni Bianchi." "Mr. Bianchi," Emma managed, accepting his outstretched hand. His grip was too firm, held too long. "The pleasure is all mine, my dear." Luca's never brought a date to one of these events before. You must be very special." "I certainly think so," Emma said, leaning slightly into Luca's side. "Luca's been showing me around the city. I'm still relatively new to New York. Where are you from originally?" "Chicago," she said, picking a city large enough to be vague about. "Big change from the Midwest." "I imagine so. And what brought you to our fair city?" Emma felt like she was being interrogated, but she kept her smile in place. "Work, initially, but I found reasons to stay." Giovanni's eyes flicked to Luca, then back to her. "I'm sure you did. Tell me, what line of work are you in?" "Event planning, corporate functions, fundraisers. That sort of thing? How interesting. Perhaps we should talk business sometime. I'm always looking for fresh talent." "That's very kind," Emma said carefully, "but I'm pretty booked up these days." "Of course," he handed her a business card. "Don't hesitate to call. I'll keep that in mind." Giovanni turned back to Luca. "We should catch up soon, Luca. It's been too long since we've had a proper conversation." "I'm sure our paths will cross again," Luca replied neutrally. "I'm counting on it." Giovanni's smile turned predatory. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." As he walked away, Emma felt like she could finally breathe again. "Wow. He's dangerous," Luca finished. "And now he's very interested in you. Is that bad?" "Potentially. Giovanni doesn't make casual conversation. Everything he does serves a purpose." "What kind of purpose?" Luca was quiet for a moment, watching Giovanni rejoin his sons across the room. "I think he's trying to figure out if you're a weakness he can exploit." "And am I?" Luca looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emma felt something shift between them. The fake relationship suddenly felt a lot less fake. "That," he said quietly, "is what I'm afraid of." Before Emma could respond, the lights dimmed, and a voice announced that dinner was about to be served. As they moved toward their table, Emma caught Giovanni Bianchi watching them from across the room, his calculating gaze following their every move. She had a feeling the evening was just getting started. The dinner portion of the gala was an exercise in strategic seating that would have impressed military generals. Emma found herself positioned between Luca and an elderly philanthropist named Henry Langston, while directly across from them sat Antonio Bianchi, Giovanni's eldest son, and his wife, a stunning blonde named Olivia, who looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. "So, Emma," Antonio said, cutting into his salmon with precise movements, "my father mentioned you're in event planning. That must be fascinating work." "It has its moments," Emma replied carefully, acutely aware that every word was being analyzed, "though I imagine it's nothing compared to your family's business ventures." Antonio's smile was sharp. "We dabble in various industries, real estate, hospitality, import-export, keeping busy, you know." "Import-export sounds intriguing. What kinds of goods do you specialize in?" Olivia laughed, a tinkling sound that somehow managed to be both beautiful and cold. "Oh," Antonio's being modest, "the Bianchi family has interests all over the world. Wine from Italy, textiles from the East, art from Europe. We appreciate quality." The way she said quality made Emma's skin crawl. But she maintained her smile. "How wonderful to have such diverse interests. It must keep you traveling quite a bit." "Constantly," Antonio agreed. "Though we always enjoy coming back to New York. It's home, after all." "Speaking of which, how are you finding the city?" "Luca mentioned you're relatively new here." "I love it," Emma said honestly. "There's an energy here that's unlike anywhere else, though I have to admit, the social scene is taking some getting used to." "Oh, you'll adapt quickly," Olivia said with false sweetness, "especially with Luca as your guide. He knows everyone who matters." Henry Langston, who had been quietly listening while enjoying his wine, suddenly spoke up. "Emma, my dear, I couldn't help but overhear that you're in event planning. Perhaps you could give me some advice. My granddaughter is getting married next spring, and the wedding planner we hired is, let's say, not meeting expectations." Grateful for the change of subject, Emma turned to him with genuine enthusiasm. "I'd be happy to help. What seems to be the main issue?" "Everything," Henry laughed. "The woman seems to think bigger is always better. She wants ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra, and enough flowers to supply a small country. My granddaughter just wants something elegant and intimate." "That's a common problem." Emma nodded sympathetically. "Some planners get caught up in making a statement, rather than creating an experience that reflects the couple. What's your granddaughter's style like?" As Henry described his granddaughter, a young doctor who loved classic literature and gardening. Emma found herself genuinely engaged in the conversation. She suggested intimate venues, literary-themed decorations, and garden-inspired floral arrangements that would be both elegant and personal. "You're brilliant," Henry exclaimed. "Would you consider consulting on the wedding?" "I'd pay you. I'd be honored," Emma said warmly, "though I should warn you, I'm pretty booked up for the next few months." She felt Luca's hand find hers under the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. When she glanced at him, she saw something soft in his expression that made her heart skip. "That's quite a recommendation," Antonio observed, his tone neutral but his eyes calculating. "Henry has impeccable taste. If he's impressed, you must be very talented indeed." "I just try to listen to what people actually want rather than what I think they should want," Emma replied. "A refreshing approach," Olivia said. "So many people in service industries forget that it's about the client, not their own ego." The barb was subtle but clear, a reminder that Emma was, in their eyes, hired help. But before Emma could respond, Luca's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Emma's modesty is one of her most endearing qualities," he said, his tone conversational but with an underlying steel, "though anyone who's seen her work knows she's exceptional at what she does." The Carson wedding last month was flawless. Emma blinked, surprised by the specific detail. The Carson wedding was real. She had coordinated it, and it had been one of her biggest successes. How did Luca know about that? "The Carsons," Henry mused. "Lovely family. I heard their daughter's wedding was spectacular." "It was beautiful," Emma managed, still trying to process how Luca knew about her work. "Luca has always had an eye for quality," Antonio said, raising his wine glass in what might have been a toast or a challenge, in business and in his personal life. "Speaking of business," Olivia leaned forward conspiratorially, "I heard through the grapevine that you're expanding into the Lower East Side." "Luca." Bold move. Luca's expression didn't change, but Emma felt his hand tighten slightly on hers. "I'm always looking for good investment opportunities. Of course, though that particular neighborhood has such character, I imagine it comes with unique challenges, nothing I can't handle." The conversation continued through the rest of dinner, a careful dance of information and misdirection. Emma began to understand that these people spoke in code, every comment layered with meaning she was only beginning to grasp. When the dinner portion ended and people began mingling again, Luca guided her toward the bar. As soon as they were out of earshot, Emma turned to him. "How did you know about the Carson wedding?" Luca had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have done some research after you told me you were an event planner." "Research?" "I needed to know who I was dealing with, for safety reasons. And I was impressed. Your client testimonials are glowing. Your portfolio is extensive, and you've built a solid reputation in just 3 years." The Carson wedding was featured in Martha Stewart Weddings. Emma stared at him. "You read Martha Stewart Weddings?" "I'm thorough. That's actually kind of sweet. In a stalkerish way, I prefer a comprehensive background check." They were interrupted by Nico, who appeared with a champagne flute in each hand and a grin on his face. "Brother and the lovely Emma, you two are the talk of the party." "In a good way or a bad way?" Emma asked. "Depends on who you ask. Evelyn Whitmore is telling anyone who will listen that you're a social climber who seduced Luca for his money." "Charming," Emma muttered. But Nico continued cheerfully. "Henry Langston is singing your praises to the entire board of directors. Apparently, you solved his wedding planner crisis in 10 minutes. It wasn't that difficult." "Don't be modest," Luca said. "You were brilliant. You handled Antonio and Olivia perfectly, charmed Henry, and managed to make Evelyn look petty by comparison. I just answered questions honestly." "Exactly," Nico said, "which in this crowd is revolutionary." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance. Emma turned to see a young woman with dark hair arguing with security. Even from a distance, it was clear she was upset about something. "Excuse me," the woman called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "I need to speak with Luca DeSantis. It's urgent." All eyes turned toward their group. Luca's expression grew grim as he recognized the woman. "Isabella," he said quietly. "You know her?" Emma asked. "She works at one of my properties. The Horizon building." Understanding dawned. The building the Bianchis had just purchased. "Mr. DeSantis." Isabella broke free from security and hurried toward them, her evening dress wrinkled and her makeup smudged. "Thank goodness you're here. They came to the building today. The new owners, they're evicting everyone." "What?" Luca stepped forward, his businessman persona snapping into place. Isabella, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened. They showed up this afternoon with lawyers and security guards. Said everyone has 30 days to vacate. Mrs. Lee, on the 4th floor, she's been there 20 years. Mr. Alvarez has his photography studio in the basement. They're all being kicked out. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she saw Giovanni Bianchi watching the scene from across the room. His expression one of satisfied amusement. Did they give a reason? Luca asked. Renovations, they said. But Mr. DeSantis, these people don't have anywhere else to go. Mrs. Lee can barely afford her current rent. And Mr. Alvarez has clients booked through next year. This is neither the time nor the place for this discussion. Antonio Bianchi had materialized beside them, his voice smooth but firm. Perhaps you should have your employee schedule an appointment. My former employee, Giovanni Bianchi added, joining his son. The building is under new management now. Isabella's face flushed with anger. These people have rights. You can't just throw them out on the street. Actually, Giovanni smiled coldly. It's all perfectly legal. Isn't that right, counselor? A thin man in an expensive suit stepped forward, presumably their lawyer. All eviction notices were served in accordance with New York housing law. The tenants have 30 days to vacate. 30 days before Christmas, Isabella said, her voice breaking. Mrs. Lee has grandchildren coming to visit. Mr. Alvarez has a gallery showing planned. Emma watched the scene unfold with growing horror. These weren't just business transactions. These were people's lives being destroyed. She looked at the faces around them and saw that most of the gala attendees had turned away, uncomfortable with the drama but unwilling to get involved. There must be something that can be done, she said, stepping forward before she could stop herself. Giovanni's cold eyes fixed on her. Miss Rodriguez, isn't it? This is a business matter. Perhaps you should leave it to those who understand such thing. The condescension in his voice made Emma's temper flare. I understand that you're about to make families homeless right before the holidays. I'm about to improve a property and increase its value. That's called business. That's called heartless. The ballroom had gone quiet around them. Emma realized that everyone was watching, waiting to see how this confrontation would play out. Giovanni stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. My dear, you're new to this city, so let me give you some advice. Sometimes it's better to mind your own business. Giovanni. Luca's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I think that's enough. Is it? Your girlfriend seems to have opinions about matters that don't concern her. Emma concerns me. Therefore, her opinions concern me. The two men faced each other across the small space, and Emma could feel the decades of history and animosity between them. This wasn't just about a building or even about business. This was personal. Gentlemen, Henry Langston appeared at Emma's side, his voice carrying the authority of old money and social position. Perhaps we should remember where we are. This is a charity gala, not a boardroom. Of course, Giovanni said, his smile returning but not reaching his eyes. You're absolutely right. My apologies for the disruption. He turned to Isabella. Miss Lopez, you have my contact information if you need to discuss the transition. Now, if you'll excuse us, we should allow these good people to return to their evening. As the Bianchis moved away, Isabella grabbed Luca's arm. Mr. DeSantis, please, these people are counting on you. I know, Luca said quietly. We'll figure something out. But the building isn't mine anymore. That doesn't mean I'm going to abandon the tenants. Isabella's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. After she left, escorted out by more gentle security guards, the three of them stood in awkward silence. Well, Nico said finally, that was dramatic. This is what I was afraid of, Luca said, running a hand through his hair. They're not just coming after my business. They're going after innocent people to get to me. What can you do? Emma asked. I don't know yet, but I'll think of something. As the evening wound down, Emma found herself on the terrace outside the ballroom, needing some air after the confrontation. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Regret getting involved yet? Luca's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the door frame, his bow tie loosened and his formal mask finally slipping. No, she said honestly. Those people needed someone to speak up for them, even if it put you in Giovanni's crosshairs. Especially then. She wrapped her arms around herself as a cool breeze swept across the terrace. My grandmother always said that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She raised me after my parents died. Luca moved to stand beside her at the railing. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Car accident when I was 8. Drunk driver. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. But Luca could hear the old pain beneath the words. Abuela taught me that we have a responsibility to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Is that why you became an event planner? Emma laughed softly. That's a weird connection to make. Not really. You spend your time making people's dreams come true. Weddings, celebrations, moments that matter. It's another way of taking care of people. She looked at him in surprise. I never thought of it that way. I have a confession, Luca said after a moment. I didn't just research your business credentials. What else did you find out? That you volunteer at a women's shelter twice a month, that you coordinated a fundraiser for the children's hospital that raised more money than they'd seen in 5 years, that you once punched a guy at a wedding for grabbing a bridesmaid inappropriately. You really are thorough. The point is, everything I learned told me the same thing. You're exactly the kind of person who would throw herself into a stranger's car to escape a bad situation, and exactly the kind of person who would stand up to Giovanni Bianchi for people she'd never met. Is that good or bad? It's terrifying, he said honestly, because it means you're going to get hurt, and I'm going to feel responsible. I'm tougher than I look. I know. That's what scares me. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city below. Finally, Emma spoke. What happens now? Now we go home and pretend tonight went according to plan. Did it? Luca considered the question. Giovanni knows about you now. He'll see you as either an asset or a liability. And knowing Giovanni, he'll try to turn you into the former before deciding you're the latter. Meaning? Meaning he's going to try to get to me through you. And you're okay with that? Luca turned to look at her. And in the dim light from the ballroom, Emma could see the conflict in his expression. No, he said quietly. I'm not okay with that at all. As they prepared to leave, Emma realized that somewhere between the charity gala and the confrontation with the Bianchis, their fake relationship had begun to feel decidedly real, and judging by the way Luca kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking, she wasn't the only one who had noticed. The question was, what were they going to do about it? The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp December air that made New York feel like a snow globe, waiting to be shaken. Emma woke up in the guest suite of Luca's penthouse, momentarily disoriented by the Egyptian cotton sheets and the view of Central Park stretching endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she allowed herself to pretend this was her life, waking up in luxury with a man like Luca DeSantis just down the hall. Then reality crashed back, along with the memory of Giovanni Bianchi's cold smile and Isabella's desperate face. She found Luca in his home office, already dressed in a charcoal gray suit despite the early hour. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, his free hand gesturing emphatically even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. When he noticed her in the doorway, his expression softened. Sì, capisco. Grazie, Lorenzo. He ended the call and turned to face her fully. Good morning. How did you sleep? Like I was floating on a cloud made of money, Emma said, then immediately felt foolish. Sorry, that sounded accurate. Luca's mouth quirked up in a half-smile. Clara left breakfast in the kitchen. Coffee's fresh. You're up early for someone who was at a charity gala until midnight. Early meetings. The Bianchi situation requires immediate attention. Emma settled into one of the leather chairs across from his desk, tucking her legs beneath her. She'd borrowed one of his Columbia University sweatshirts, which hung on her like a dress, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Somehow, Luca thought she looked more beautiful than she had in the emerald gown. What did you find out? She asked. The evictions are legal, but barely. Giovanni's lawyers filed the paperwork at exactly the right time to exploit a loophole in the tenant protection laws. It's a masterpiece of legal manipulation, but there has to be something we can do. Emma flushed slightly. I meant you. What can you do? Luca studied her for a long moment. Why does this matter so much to you? You don't know these people. I don't have to know them personally to care about what happens to them. Emma's voice grew passionate. Mrs. Lee is probably sitting in her apartment right now, trying to figure out how to tell her grandchildren that Christmas might be different this year. Mr. Alvarez has probably been up all night trying to figure out how to move 20 years of photography equipment and client files. These aren't just business transactions, Luca. They're lives. I know that. Do you? The question came out sharper than she intended, because sometimes I wonder if people like you, people with enough money to buy buildings and move people around like chess pieces, if you really understand what it's like to worry about rent or wonder where you're going to sleep next month. Luca's expression went carefully blank. People like me, that's not what I meant, isn't it? He stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the city. You think because I have money, I don't understand struggle. I think having money for a long time can make it easy to forget what it's like not to have it. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens, Luca said quietly, his back still turned to her. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep Nico and me fed. I wore second-hand clothes until I was 16 and started earning my own money. I understand exactly what those tenants are going through because I lived it. Emma felt her stomach drop. Luca, I'm sorry. I didn't know. My mother died when I was 19, he continued, his voice steady but distant. Cancer. She spent the last 2 years of her life working herself to death because she couldn't afford to take time off for treatment. She was so worried about leaving Nico and me with debt that she kept working even when the chemo made her so sick she could barely stand. I'm so sorry. The day she died, I swore I'd never be powerless like that again. Never let money, or the lack of it, control my life or hurt the people I care about. He turned back to face her, and Emma saw a pain in his eyes that made her chest tight. So yes, Emma, I understand what those tenants are going through. I understand it better than you know. She wanted to go to him, to somehow bridge the space between them, but something in his posture warned her off. Then help them. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Giovanni isn't just targeting random tenants. He's targeting people I've helped before. Mrs. Lee's granddaughter got a scholarship to Columbia, a scholarship funded by one of my foundations. Mr. Alvarez's photography studio, I helped him get the lease when he couldn't get approved anywhere else because of his credit. Understanding dawned on Emma's face. He's sending you a message. He's telling me that he can hurt anyone I care about anytime he wants. And if I try to help the tenants directly, he'll just escalate. So what do? I find another way. Before Emma could ask what that meant, Luca's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Nico, it's 7 in the morning. His expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. Are you sure? When? No, don't do anything. I'll be right there. He hung up and was already reaching for his coat. What's wrong? Emma asked. Giovanni made another move. He bought the building where Nico's restaurant is located. Oh no, it gets worse. Nico just got served with an eviction notice. Apparently, the new owners want to renovate his space, too. Emma's blood boiled. That's not a coincidence. No, it's not. Luca's voice was ice-cold fury, barely held in check. He's going after my family now. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Luca. No. His tone brooked new argument. Giovanni escalated this beyond business. I won't put you in danger. I'm already in danger. He knows about me now. Keeping me locked away in your penthouse isn't going to change that. It might keep you safe. I don't want to be safe if it means hiding while you and your family are under attack. They stared at each other across the office, the air thick with tension and unspoken feelings. Finally, Luca sighed. If you come with me, you do exactly what I say. No arguing, no confronting anyone, no heroic gestures. Deal. I mean it, Emma. Giovanni isn't just ruthless. He's dangerous. If he thinks you're a liability, he won't hesitate to eliminate you. Eliminate me? Giovanni's business interests extend far beyond real estate. The family has connections that go back generations, and not all of them are legitimate. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying he's... I'm saying that Giovanni Bianchi doesn't just make business deals, he makes problems disappear. Nico's restaurant, Nonna's Kitchen, was a cozy Italian place in Little Italy that always smelled like garlic and fresh bread. When they arrived, they found Nico pacing behind the bar like a caged tiger, while his girlfriend Chloe sat at a corner table with a laptop, furiously typing. Tell me everything, Luca said without preamble. The eviction notice came this morning, Nico said, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by barely controlled anger. 30 days to vacate for extensive renovations. They're offering to buy out my lease, but it's a fraction of what the place is worth. And if you don't take the buyout, then I'm out anyway with nothing to show for 5 years of building this business. Chloe looked up from her laptop. I've been researching the new property management company. It's a shell corporation. But if you dig deep enough, It leads back to Bianchi Enterprises. Of course it does, Luca muttered. There's more, Chloe continued. I called around to some contacts in real estate. Giovanni's been quietly buying up properties all over the neighborhood. This isn't just about you guys. He's planning something bigger. Like what? Emma asked. I think he's trying to corner the market on prime real estate in several key areas, Chloe explained. If he controls enough properties, he can basically dictate terms for entire neighborhoods. A monopoly, Luca said grimly. Exactly. And anyone who doesn't play by his rules gets squeezed out. Nico slammed his hand down on the bar. 5 years, Luca. 5 years I've been building this place. I know every regular customer's name, their favorite dishes, their kids' birthdays. This isn't just a business. It's a community. Emma looked around the restaurant, taking in the framed photos of happy customers, the children's drawings taped to the walls, the wine bottles signed by couples celebrating anniversaries. She could see why Nico was so devastated. This wasn't just about money. It was about destroying something beautiful and meaningful. What if we fight it? She asked. How? Nico laughed bitterly. Giovanni has lawyers, money, and apparently the patience to plan this out over months or years. What do I have? You have the community you just talked about, Emma said. An idea beginning to form. You have customers who love this place, neighbors who depend on it, employees whose livelihoods are at stake. That's not enough to fight an eviction. It might be enough to fight something bigger. Luca looked at her sharply. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Giovanni's making this personal because he wants you to make it personal, too. He wants you angry and reactive, making decisions based on emotion instead of strategy. So, what if we don't give him what he wants? What if, instead of fighting Giovanni directly, we make this about something bigger than just your family? Chloe leaned forward, interested. What do you mean? Giovanni's buying up properties all over the city, right? Displacing families, destroying small businesses, breaking up communities. That's not just a DeSantis problem. That's a New York problem. You want to go public, Luca said, understanding dawning in his eyes. I want to make Giovanni the face of everything people hate about gentrification and corporate greed, Emma said, her excitement growing as the plan took shape. Think about it. We're less than 2 weeks from Christmas. Giovanni's throwing families out of their homes during the holidays. He's destroying a beloved neighborhood restaurant. He's the perfect villain. And how exactly do we do that? Nico asked. We tell the story. We make people care. Emma turned to Chloe. You work in marketing, right? Public relations for a tech startup. Perfect. We need media coverage, social media campaigns, maybe even some celebrity endorsements. We turn this into a David and Goliath story that everyone can rally behind. The press loves that narrative, Chloe mused, especially around the holidays. But Giovanni won't just sit back and let us attack him publicly, Luca warned. No, he won't, Emma agreed, which is why we have to be smart about it. We don't make this about Giovanni personally. We make it about the issue: corporate landlords displacing longtime tenants, small businesses being driven out by profit-hungry developers. We make Giovanni just one example of a larger problem. That could work, Nico said slowly, but it's risky. If it backfires, we're no worse off than we are now. Emma pointed out, Giovanni's already coming after your restaurant, already evicting the tenants from the Horizon building. What do we have to lose? Our lives, Luca said bluntly. Giovanni doesn't like being made to look bad in public. Then we better make sure we win. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Isabella Lopez, who burst through the restaurant door, looking frantic. Mr. DeSantis, thank goodness you're here. Something terrible has happened. What now? Luca asked. It's Mrs. Lee. She had a heart attack this morning. She's in the hospital. The room went silent. Emma felt sick to her stomach. Is she going to be okay? She asked. The doctors don't know yet, but her daughter thinks the stress from the eviction notice. She's been so worried about her grandchildren, about Christmas. Where is she? Luca was already reaching for his coat. Mount Sinai. Her daughter's with her, but she doesn't have insurance. And the bills? I'll take care of the bills, Luca said immediately. All of them? You can't, Isabella said miserably. Her daughter already asked. The hospital won't accept payment from you. What do you mean they won't accept payment? Someone called the hospital this morning, told them that Mrs. Lee was involved in a legal dispute, and that any third-party payments might constitute witness tampering or bribery. The implications hit them all at once. Giovanni had moved fast, blocking any attempt by Luca to help Mrs. Lee directly. "That's sick," Nico started. "He's covering all his bases," Luca said grimly, "making sure I can't help anyone without looking like I'm trying to buy them off." "There has to be something we can do," Emma said desperately. "There is," Chloe said quietly. "We do exactly what Emma suggested. We go public, and we do it now." Mrs. Lee becomes the face of Giovanni's cruelty, an elderly woman alone for the holidays, stressed into a heart attack by corporate greed. "That's exploiting her tragedy," Isabella protested. "No," Emma said, understanding flooding through her. "It's making sure her tragedy means something. It's making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Luca looked at each of them in turn, then pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Nico asked. "Calling my publicist," Luca said. "If we're going to war with Giovanni Bianchi, we're going to do it right." As Luca made his call, Emma found herself staring out the restaurant window at the bustling street beyond. Somewhere out there, Giovanni was probably in his office, satisfied with his morning's work. He'd managed to hurt an innocent old woman and back Luca into a corner, all before lunch. But Giovanni had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that Luca would play by the same rules he did. Rules where money and power were the only weapons that mattered. What he hadn't counted on was Emma. With her event planner's attention to detail and her grandmother's sense of justice. If Giovanni wanted a war, he was about to get one, but it wouldn't be the kind of war he was expecting. "Emma," Luca said, hanging up his phone, "my publicist wants to meet with us in an hour. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back." "I'm sure," she said without hesitation. "Mrs. Lee deserves justice. Nico deserves to keep his restaurant, and Giovanni Bianchi deserves to learn that some things can't be bought or bullied." "And us?" Luca asked quietly. "What happens to us when this is over?" It was a loaded question, heavy with implications about their fake relationship and the very real feelings that were developing between them. Emma met his eyes, seeing her own uncertainty reflected there. "I guess we'll find out," she said. As they prepared to leave for the meeting with Luca's publicist, Emma caught sight of her reflection in the restaurant's window. She was still wearing Luca's sweatshirt. Her hair was still in a messy bun, and she had no makeup on. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had attended the charity gala the night before, but somehow she felt more like herself than she had in months, maybe even years. She was about to take on one of the most powerful men in New York, armed with nothing but a good cause and a growing network of people who cared about justice. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like exactly where she was supposed to be. "Ready?" Luca asked, offering her his arm. "Ready," she said, taking it. As they walked out into the crisp December morning, Emma realized that somewhere between hiding in Luca's car and deciding to fight Giovanni Bianchi, she'd stopped running from her problems and started running towards something better. The question was whether that something better included the man walking beside her, or whether their fake relationship would become another casualty of the war they were about to start. Either way, she was done being a bystander in her own life. Giovanni Bianchi was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who has nothing left to lose. And right now, Emma Rodriguez felt like she had everything to gain. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in the makeshift war room that had once been Luca's pristine home office, surrounded by whiteboards covered in timelines, contact lists, and media strategy notes. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers littered every surface, and the usually immaculate space looked like a hurricane had blown through it. It had been the most intense 3 weeks of her life. The media campaign had exploded beyond their wildest expectations. The story of Mrs. Lee's heart attack had struck a nerve with New Yorkers who were tired of seeing their neighbors displaced by corporate greed. Chloe's PR expertise, combined with Emma's event planning skills and Nico's natural charisma, had created a perfect storm of public outrage. Save Our Neighborhoods had become the rallying cry, with celebrity endorsements pouring in from actors, musicians, and even some politicians. The story had been picked up by major news outlets, and Giovanni Bianchi's face was now synonymous with everything people hated about ruthless development. But Giovanni wasn't going down without a fight. "He's filed lawsuits against 3 of our biggest supporters," Chloe announced, hanging up her phone and adding another note to the whiteboard, claiming defamation and interference with business operations. "How much is this going to cost them?" Emma asked. looking up from her laptop where she was coordinating the afternoon's press conference, enough to scare them into backing down, which is exactly what Giovanni wants. What about the others? Still holding strong, but I can see some wavering. Giovanni's playing the long game, death by 1,000 legal cuts. Luca emerged from his bedroom, where he'd been on a conference call with his lawyers for the past 2 hours. He looked exhausted, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his shirt wrinkled. Emma's heart clenched at the sight of him. The stress of the past few weeks had taken its toll on all of them. But Luca was bearing the brunt of Giovanni's retaliation. "What's the verdict?" Nico asked, looking up from where he was reviewing restaurant supply contracts. He'd been trying to run Nana's kitchen while simultaneously fighting his eviction, and the strain was showing. "Good news and bad news," Luca said, loosening his tie. "The good news is that the judge granted a temporary restraining order preventing any more evictions until the housing rights lawsuit goes to trial. And the bad news? The trial won't happen for at least 6 months. And Giovanni's lawyers are arguing that the restraining order doesn't apply to voluntary lease terminations." Emma felt her stomach sink. "How is that legal?" "It walks the line," Luca admitted. "Giovanni's lawyers are very good at finding loopholes." "Speaking of Giovanni," Chloe said, checking her phone, "he's holding a press conference in 2 hours. His publicist says he's going to set the record straight about the harassment campaign being conducted against his family's legitimate business interests. He's going to play the victim." Emma realized. Classic move. Nico agreed. "Paint us as unreasonable activists trying to destroy honest businessmen. We need to get ahead of this," Emma said, her mind already racing. "What do we have scheduled for today?" "Mrs. Lee was supposed to do an interview with Channel 7 this afternoon," Chloe said, "but her daughter called this morning. She's had another episode. The doctor thinks the stress is making her condition worse." "Damn," Luca muttered, running his hands through his hair. "We can't ask her to keep putting herself through this." "We don't have to," Emma said quietly. An idea was forming crazy and risky, and probably doomed to failure, but it might be their only shot. "What if we change tactics completely?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if instead of fighting Giovanni in the media, we go directly to him?" The room went silent. Chloe stopped writing on the whiteboard. Nico put down his phone. Luca stared at her like she'd suggested they all jump off the roof. "Emma," he said carefully, "that's a terrible idea. Hear me out. Giovanni's playing defense right now, responding to our moves. But what if we force him to make a choice? What if we offer him something he wants more than these properties?" "Like what?" "Like you." Luca's expression went from concerned to alarmed. "Absolutely not." "Think about it," Emma continued, her excitement growing as the plan crystallized. "This was never really about the buildings, was it? It was about proving he could beat you. It was about showing the city that Luca DeSantis isn't untouchable. That doesn't mean I'm going to hand myself over to him. Not hand yourself over, negotiate, but from a position of strength." "What kind of strength?" Chloe asked, intrigued despite herself. "The kind that comes from having the entire city watching." Emma turned to the whiteboard and started writing. "We call a public meeting tomorrow night. Invite everyone, the tenants, the press, community leaders, politicians. We make it a town hall about development and community rights. And then we invite Giovanni to defend his position publicly in front of everyone he's been trying to intimidate." Nico whistled low. "That's either brilliant or suicidal." "Probably both," Emma admitted. "But here's the thing. Giovanni's been operating in the shadows, using lawyers and shell companies and intimidation tactics. He's powerful, but only because he controls the narrative. What happens when we drag him into the light? He might come out swinging," Luca warned, "or he might realize that the cost of winning isn't worth it. And if he doesn't show, then he looks like a coward who won't face the people he's been hurting. We win either way." Luca was quiet for a long moment, staring at the whiteboard where Emma had outlined her plan. She could see him running through scenarios, calculating risks and benefits. "There's something else," he said finally. "Something I haven't told you about Giovanni." "What?" "He's not just ruthless, he's obsessive. Once he fixates on something or someone, he doesn't let go. Even if we win this battle, he'll keep coming after us, after you." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if we do this, it has to end here completely. No half measures, no temporary victories. We have to find a way to make Giovanni walk away permanently." "How do we do that?" Luca looked at each of them in turn, then back at the whiteboard. "We give him what he's really wanted all along, which is a public defeat, of Luca DeSantis. The next evening, the community center in Little Italy was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls, and the overflow crowd spilled out onto the sidewalk, where speakers had been set up to broadcast the proceedings. Emma stood backstage, checking her notes for the 100th time. She'd traded her event planner hat for that of a moderator, and the responsibility felt enormous. This wasn't just about organizing a successful event. This was about changing lives. "You ready for this?" Luca asked, appearing beside her. He looked devastatingly handsome in a navy suit, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Are you?" she countered. "Honestly, no. But I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Because you believe we can win. Because I believe you can win." The simple confidence in his voice made her heart flutter. Over the past 3 weeks, their fake relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected. They hadn't talked about it explicitly. There hadn't been time between strategy sessions and press conferences, but the feelings were there, growing stronger every day. "Luca," she started, but he shook his head. "After tonight," he said. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out after tonight." Chloe appeared, clipboard in hand and a headset around her neck. 5 minutes to showtime. "Emma, you sure you don't want me to moderate instead?" "I'm sure." Emma had insisted on taking the lead role, partly because she was good at managing crowds, but mostly because she needed Giovanni to see her as the architect of his public humiliation. If Luca was right about Giovanni's obsessive nature, she wanted that obsession focused on her, not on the people she cared about. "The Channel 7 crew is set up in the back," Chloe continued. "We've got reporters from The Times, The Post, and about a dozen bloggers. Social media engagement is through the roof. Any word from Giovanni?" "His people confirmed he'll be here, along with his legal team." "How many lawyers?" "Apparently, half of Manhattan." Nico appeared, straightening his tea nervously. "The tenants are here." Mrs. Lee insisted on coming, even though her daughter tried to talk her out of it. "How is she?" "Determined. She says Giovanni Bianchi doesn't get to win by making her too scared to fight." Emma felt a surge of admiration for the elderly woman's courage. "What about Mr. Alvarez?" "Front row, center, with a camera crew documenting everything for a documentary he's making about the fight." "Perfect." Emma took a deep breath, mentally running through her opening remarks one more time. "Okay, let's do this." The community center erupted in applause as she walked onto the small stage. The energy in the room was electric anger and hope and determination all mixed together. She could see familiar faces scattered throughout the crowd. Mrs. Lee, sitting proudly in the front row despite her frailty. Mr. Millionaire'S, Alvarez with his camera equipment. Dozens of other tenants and business owners who had become caught up in Giovanni's web of intimidation. And there, near the back of the room, sat Giovanni Bianchi with 3 lawyers and what looked like a private security detail. "Good evening, everyone," Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here because something important is happening in our city, and it's happening to our neighbors, our friends, and our families." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd. 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Lee received an eviction notice. She's lived in her apartment for 20 years, raised her children there, welcomed her grandchildren there, but apparently her home was standing in the way of progress. A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. 2 weeks ago, Nico DeSantis received an eviction notice for his restaurant, Nana's Kitchen, a place where 3 generations of families have celebrated birthdays and anniversaries and first dates, but apparently his community gathering place was also standing in the way of progress. The murmur grew louder. Last week, we learned that Mr. Alvarez's photography studio, where he's captured 40 years of wedding days and family portraits and graduations, was also standing in the way of progress. Now, the crowd was openly angry, voices calling out in support of the displaced tenants. So, tonight we're here to ask a simple question. Whose progress are we talking about? And what happens to a community when progress means destroying everything that makes it a community in the first place? Thunderous applause filled the room. Emma waited for it to die down before continuing. "We've invited Giovanni Bianchi, the man behind these evictions, to join us tonight. Mr. Bianchi, would you like to address the community?" All eyes turned toward the back of the room. Giovanni stood slowly, his expensive suit and confident bearing making him look distinctly out of place among the working-class crowd. But his smile was calm, almost amused. "Thank you, Miss Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room despite the lack of a microphone. "I appreciate the opportunity to clarify some misconceptions." He walked toward the stage with the confidence of a man who had faced down much tougher crowds than this. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that change is difficult, but the reality is that New York City is growing and evolving, and we have a choice. We can guide that growth responsibly, or we can let our neighborhoods deteriorate while we cling to the past. What about the people who already live here?" Someone called out from the crowd. "That's an excellent question," Giovanni replied smoothly. "The truth is, my company has offered generous buyouts to every tenant facing relocation. We're not throwing anyone out on the street. We're offering them the opportunity to improve their situations." "Generous?" Mrs. Lee's daughter stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "You offered my mother a fraction of what her apartment is worth, and when she said no, the stress put her in the hospital." Giovanni's expression didn't change. "I'm sorry to hear about your mother's health issues, but I can't be held responsible for every individual's reaction to a business transaction." The crowd erupted in boos and angry shouts. Emma raised her hand for quiet. "Mr. Bianchi," she said, "let's talk numbers. What did you pay for the Horizon building?" "That's confidential business information. Actually, it's public record." Emma consulted her notes. "You paid $12 million for a building worth at least $18 million because the previous owner was facing financial pressure. Some might call that taking advantage of someone's desperation. I call it smart business. And the buyouts you're offering the tenants, they average about 40% of market value for comparable apartments. The tenants are free to negotiate through lawyers. Lawyers they can't afford. For apartments they'll never be able to find at those prices." Emma's voice was getting stronger, more passionate. "Mr. Bianchi, you're not offering these people opportunities. You're forcing them out of their homes and their community so you can maximize your profit." "Miss Rodriguez." Giovanni's voice took on a harder edge. "You seem to have a very romantic view of property development. This is a business, not a charity, and that's exactly the problem." Emma shot back. "You see homes and communities and livelihoods as nothing more than line items on a balance sheet. These aren't just properties, Mr. Bianchi. They're people's lives. People's lives change. That's the nature of progress." Though, whose progress? The question came from Nico, who had stood up in the front row. "Because I don't see how throwing Mrs. Lee out of her home progresses anything except your bank account." "Mr. DeSantis." Giovanni's smile turned predatory. "I think your family has profited quite enough from this neighborhood over the years." The implied threat was clear to everyone in the room. Giovanni was done playing nice. "You know what, Mr. Bianchi?" Emma said, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. "You're right about one thing. This is about progress. But you've made a fundamental miscalculation. Have I? You think progress means steamrolling over anyone who gets in your way, but real progress, the kind that lasts, the kind that builds something better, requires bringing people along with you." Pretty words, Miss Rodriguez. But this is New York City, not some small-town fantasy. You're right again. This is New York City, the city that built the Brooklyn Bridge and Central Park and the subway system, the city that welcomed waves of immigrants and gave them places to build new lives, the city that's always been at its best when it found ways to grow while taking care of its people. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "And do you know what made all of that possible, Mr. Bianchi? It wasn't men like you who see everything as something to be conquered and consumed. It was people like Mrs. Lee and Mr. Alvarez and Nico, people who understand that a community is more than the sum of its real estate values." "This is all very inspiring," Giovanni said, his patience clearly wearing thin, but ultimately irrelevant. "I have legal contracts, valid eviction notices, and the full backing of the law." "You also have something else," Emma said quietly. "What's that?" "The attention of every person in this room, every reporter with a camera, and every New Yorker who's watching this online right now." Giovanni's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "See, here's what you didn't account for when you started this campaign," Emma continued. "You thought you could intimidate people into silence. You thought you could hide behind shell companies and legal technicalities. You thought that because you had money and power, you could do whatever you wanted without consequences. I can. Can you? Because right now, your face is on every news channel in the city. Right now, your name is trending on social media as a symbol of everything people hate about corporate greed. Right now, every one of your future tenants and business partners is watching you explain why an elderly woman's heart attack is just the cost of doing business. Giovanni's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. So, here's my question, Mr. Bianchi. Is winning this fight really worth becoming the most hated man in New York? For a long moment, Giovanni said nothing. The room was so quiet that Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Then, slowly, his confident smile returned. Miss Rodriguez, you've made your point very eloquently, but you seem to be under the impression that I care what people think of me. Don't you? Not particularly. You see, public opinion is a luxury I can't afford. I have investors to answer to, debts to service, and profits to generate. Your neighbor's hurt feelings don't appear anywhere on my financial statements. The crowd began to murmur angrily again, but Giovanni raised his voice to continue. However, he said, I'm not unreasonable. If this community feels so strongly about keeping things the way they are, I'm prepared to make a deal. Emma felt her stomach drop. She'd expected Giovanni to fight back. But this calm confidence was somehow worse than anger. What kind of deal? The kind that gets everyone what they want. I'll cancel all the evictions, sell the buildings back to their previous owners at cost, and find other investment opportunities outside this neighborhood. The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs. It sounded too good to be true. In exchange for what? Emma asked, dreading the answer. In exchange for Mr. Luca DeSantis publicly admitting that his business practices have been just as ruthless as mine and stepping down from all his corporate positions. The room exploded into chaos. Emma heard Nico shout, "No way," from the front row while others called out questions and protests. But all she could see was Luca standing near the side of the stage with an expression of grim resignation. Giovanni raised his hand for quiet. You see, Miss Rodriguez, this was never really about the buildings or the tenants. This was about proving a point. And the point is that in this city, there's only room for one king. You're insane, Emma said. I'm practical. Mr. DeSantis has been a thorn in my family's side for years. He's blocked our deals, outbid us on properties, and generally made our business more difficult than it needs to be. This is my chance to remove that obstacle permanently. Luca would never agree to that. Oh, wouldn't he? Giovanni's smile was triumphant. Let's ask him. All eyes turned to Luca, who stepped forward slowly. Emma could see the conflict playing out on his face, the desire to protect the tenants warring with the knowledge that giving in to Giovanni would only encourage more extortion in the future. Luca, no, Emma said quietly, but loud enough for the microphones to pick up. You can't seriously be considering this. What? He's not, Nico said firmly, stepping up beside his brother, because Giovanni Bianchi isn't the only one who can play hardball. Nico, Luca Varnt. No. Big brother, you've spent 3 weeks trying to fight this guy with one hand tied behind your back because you didn't want to stoop to his level. But maybe it's time to remind everyone why Giovanni's so afraid of you in the first place. Giovanni's confident expression faltered slightly. I'm not afraid of anyone. Really? Nico's smile was sharp as a blade. Then why don't we talk about your business practices, Giovanni? Why don't we discuss the tax evasion charges that mysteriously disappeared 3 years ago? Or the environmental violations that were quietly swept under the rug? Or the very interesting offshore accounts that your accountant accidentally mentioned to the wrong person last month? The color drained from Giovanni's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Chloe stepped forward with a thick folder. Internal Bianchi Enterprises emails discussing the deliberate contamination of groundwater at the Pacific Avenue development site. Text messages between Giovanni Bianchi and City Inspector Mark Sullivan arranging bribes for building permit approvals. Bank records showing payments to 3 different accounting firms to hide income from. That's enough. Giovanni snapped. Is it? Luca spoke for the first time since Giovanni's ultimatum. His voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made everyone in the room lean forward to listen. Because I have to say, Giovanni, for someone who just accused me of ruthless business practices, your family seems to have been quite busy. Those documents are forgeries. Are they? Because I'm pretty sure the FBI would be very interested in authenticating them, especially since we've already provided copies to Agent Laura Thompson of the White Collar Crime Division. Giovanni's confident mask was cracking now, revealing the desperate man underneath. You don't have the guts to go that far. Try me. Luca said quietly. You want to play games with people's homes and lives? Let's see how you like playing games with federal prosecutors. You're making a mistake, DeSantis. The only mistake I made was trying to fight you fairly. Luca stepped onto the stage beside Emma, and she felt some of her strength return just from having him near. But you know what, Giovanni? I'm done playing by gentlemen's rules with someone who has no honor, so here's my counteroffer, Emma said, finding her voice again. You cancel all the evictions, you sell the buildings back at cost, and you find somewhere else to invest your money. In exchange, we don't release the rest of the information we have about your business practices, and if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, every news outlet in the city gets a very interesting file about the real Giovanni Bianchi, and you get to explain to your investors and business partners why the FBI is suddenly very interested in your family's financial records. Giovanni looked around the room, seeing nothing but hostile faces staring back at him. His lawyers were whispering urgently in his ear, and even his security detail looked uncomfortable. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, Luca said firmly. It is. You're done here, Giovanni. Find another playground. For a moment, Emma thought Giovanni might try to fight back one more time, but then his shoulders sagged slightly, and she knew they'd won. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. You'll have the contract cancellations by tomorrow morning, and the building sales by the end of the week. Excellent, Emma said, her heart soaring with victory. Oh, and Giovanni, Emma continued, her voice steady and commanding. Next time you want to intimidate a community, maybe check who their friends are first. Giovanni's glare could have melted steel, but he didn't say another word. He stalked toward the exit, his lawyers and security team trailing behind him like defeated soldiers. The moment the door closed behind them, the community center erupted into celebration. People were hugging, crying, cheering, and applauding. Mrs. Lee was sobbing with relief, while her daughter held her tight. Mr. Alvarez was filming everything with tears streaming down his face. Nico was being mobbed by grateful restaurant customers, and in the middle of it all, Emma found herself pulled into Luca's arms. We did it, she whispered against his chest. You did it, he corrected, holding her tight. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. We make a good team. The best. They held each other as the celebration swirled around them, and Emma felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness, of being exactly where she belonged. Emma, Luca said, pulling back to look at her face. Yeah? About what happens now? What about it? I know this started as a fake relationship. I know we were both just playing roles to solve our respective problems, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being fake for me. And I'm hoping maybe it stopped being fake for you, too. Emma looked up into his blue eyes, seeing all the vulnerability and hope and fear reflected there. 3 weeks ago, she'd been running from her problems, hiding in a stranger's car to avoid a conversation she didn't want to have. Now she was standing in a room full of people whose lives had been changed because she'd decided to stop running and start fighting. It stopped being fake the moment you trusted me enough to tell me about your mother. She said honestly, so, what does that make us? I guess it makes us real. Real is good, Luca said, his smile lighting up his entire face. Real is very good. As he leaned down to kiss her, Emma heard applause around them and realized that their conversation had been picked up by the microphones. The entire room was cheering for their happily ever after. Well, she said, laughing as she pulled back from the kiss, I guess our relationship status is officially public now. Good, Luca said, pulling her close again. I was getting tired of pretending not to be crazy about you. Just crazy about me? Completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with you. That's convenient, Emma said, her heart soaring, because I'm completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with you, too. As they kissed again, surrounded by cheering neighbors and flashing cameras, Emma thought about how much her life had changed in just 3 weeks. She'd gone from hiding in a car to leading a community uprising. She'd gone from running away from confrontation to staring down one of the most powerful men in New York. She'd gone from being alone to being surrounded by people who cared about her. And most importantly, she'd gone from fake dating a stranger to falling in love with the most extraordinary man she'd ever met. It had started with her hiding in the wrong car. But as Lucas spun her around in his arms while their community celebrated around them, Emma realized that sometimes the wrong car was exactly the right place to be. 6 months later, Emma would plan the most beautiful wedding the Little Italy Community Center had ever seen. Mrs. Lee would cry tears of joy as she watched Emma walk down the aisle in her grandmother's dress. Mr. Alvarez would take the most stunning wedding photos of his career. Nico would cater the reception with dishes that made everyone feel like family. And Giovanni Bianchi would read about their happiness in the society pages from his new home in Miami, where he'd moved after deciding that New York was suddenly much less appealing, but all of that was still in the future. Right now, in this moment, Emma was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the community they'd fought to protect, celebrating the kind of victory that only comes when people refuse to give up on each other. Sometimes the best adventures begin with the worst possible plan, and sometimes hiding in a stranger's car is exactly the right way to find your way home. The end.